The following Frontlines report is presented without commercial interruption by FNH USA.
Chuck, you literally just got off the airplane.
We did. That's a long flight. We're looking forward to a good meal here.
Give us a sense for what Beirut is like today.
You know, there were a lot of things that surprised me. One of them was that Hezbollah pretty much owns the whole southern part of Beirut, including the airport. And so when it came to trying to get photos of the site where the blast happened, we had to literally go ask permission from Hezbollah to get into the site. It was a little tense there for a while, and we had to work to get the story, but everything worked out in the end.
You've got the shot.
We did.
Hezbollah is a proxy for Iran. They're the ones who are running most of Lebanon today.
That's right, and they were back then, too. The bombing of the Marine barracks was a direct attack by Iran in Beirut on the United States, using Hezbollah as their actor. And the dynamics haven't changed even today. And, you know, we learned a lot about terrorism from that event. And I'd like to ask you, because you have a lot of experience in Beirut. You spent a lot of time over there in the 80s. How has it changed our perception, or the U.S. government's, the way that they deal with terrorism?
Well, it's hard to describe any parallels between the current administration and what was going on back in the 80s, because quite frankly, this administration denies the whole approach of radical Islam. Mm-hmm. We missed that. When I was the U.S. government's counterterrorism coordinator, we could put a wire diagram of any terror organization in the world, whether it's M19 or the FARC or the Baader-Meinhof gang, the Red Army faction. Incidentally, all but the FARC of that group have disappeared. They were all Soviet-inspired, Soviet-supported. It came through the Warsaw Pact or directly from the KGB. But those that didn't disappear were the Palestinian terror groups like Hamas, and those that were being directed by Iran as part of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. We missed the explosion of radical Islam. We didn't see it coming. We quite frankly thought that many of those radical Islamists were our allies in the fight against the Soviets in Afghanistan. And so it was a surprise when, first of all, the embassy goes up in flames. Second of all, the embassy annex. And then we began to focus on where is the support coming from. Mm-hmm. And of course, the support for what eventually becomes Hezbollah was coming directly from Tehran.
So I'm just curious what you were doing on the day of the attack.
I was a Marine major on the National Security Council staff. I was actually in my office when we were first alerted by European Command that something terrible had happened in Beirut. I was there on an early Sunday morning because we were actually planning the liberation of Grenada. And of course, all that planning stopped to focus on what had transpired in Beirut. We didn't know the magnitude of the catastrophe, did not have a sense, at least an immediate sense, on who had done it. And then immediately our focus became one of rescuing those who were trapped in the rubble and, of course, evacuating those who were killed back through Germany.
So what was the thought process then in the weeks after the bombing? How should we respond to this? Yeah. Well, I mean, the way I say that, because it seems like we went to Beirut to keep the peace, but there really wasn't any peace to keep.
No, they came in peace. We were peacekeepers, part of an international coalition. As you know from having been out there, the French paratroopers barracks was also bombed literally within minutes. The MO for radical Islamists is to have a major event, a catastrophic event, that, of course, if you can, set off multiple targets at the same time. That's repeated again in 1998 in Tanzania and Nairobi, and of course 9/11/01 here in the United States with 4 aircraft being hijacked simultaneously. It's kind of a pattern. Now, of course, we didn't know any of that then. Mm-hmm. We've all learned accordingly. The end result of Beirut was that the international peacekeeping effort evaporated. Not only we, but the French, the British, everybody pulled out. There were then, of course, a bunch of hijackings and all kinds of additional terror, like the kidnapping of Americans and other Westerners all over Beirut. The lesson that they took from it was you can drive the Americans out by inflicting casualties upon them.
Right. So the lesson that we need to take from that then would be that our response trains or teaches our enemies how to deal with us in the future.
They're brutal, but they're not fools. Okay, they have an agenda. It's called jihad. And what we've got to stop doing is calling it everything but. They're not extremists. It's not just Al-Qaeda. Radical Islam is today franchised out all over the world. You could call yourself one thing in one country and be something else in another country. We were on those operations in the Philippines and saw those organizations. They're not calling themselves Al-Qaeda,
Right.
but they have the same agenda. Their agenda is to dominate the part of the world in which they can control events and to impose Sharia law on the population, which is in some cases predominantly Muslim. What we've seen happen in the so-called Arab Spring is a follow-on to all of that. In fact, even though it's very controversial to say so today, what's now happening in Egypt is perhaps the first reversal of radical Islamists that we've seen ever since all of this began back in 1983.
Yeah, so it seems like it's important to really drive that point home, that America needs to remember that whatever our response is to the next terror attack is going to teach our enemies how to deal with us in the future.
And that's why it's a great tribute to you and Dennis for going out there, being on the ground here on the 30th anniversary, coming back and putting this together. And my hope is that what the American people see in this is not simply a reason to hang your heads. It's the resilience of the American spirit, that today, yes, you had 241 Marines killed 30 years ago today. And today, there's thousands of Marines on duty who stood up and volunteered to serve in some of the most difficult and dangerous places on earth, as well as soldiers and sailors and airmen and guardsmen all over the world, defending us from the likes of what they would like to be able to do to us and can't, because those first defenders,
That's right.
those first responders are out there protecting us.